Welcome to this funeral service for Gary Levine. We begin with the chanting of the 121st Psalm.
Esainai el harim me'ayin yavo Ezri me'im Adonai Ose shamayim va'aretz al yitan lamod raglecha al yanu Shomer Yisrael Adonai Shomrecha Adonai Tzilcha Yad Yaminecha Yomam HaShemesh Lo Yakeka Ve'yareach Balayla Adonai Yishmorcha mikol ra Yishmor et nafshecha Adonai Yishmor tzedcha uvoecha Me'ata ve'ad olam. Psalm 121. I lift my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from Adonai, creator of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way, and your protector will not slumber. See, the protector of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your guardian, your protection at your right hand. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. And Adonai will guard your soul, your going and your coming, now and forever.
Death has taken our beloved Gary Levine. And our friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence, there's lamentation. In the tears that have been shed, there is loneliness. Lost in their sorrow, may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God. Be with them. For Gary's love that united us in life and which death cannot sever, for his companionship that we shared along life's path and which continues through the tenderness of memory, for the gifts of his heart and his mind that brought us joy and happiness, for his mentorship, for his friendship, for his laughter, for his love, for the ways he made a difference in this community and so many others. For all these and more, we give our thanks to God. And in this time of grief, we listen to the voice of our sacred scripture that brings us the ever new message of God's nearness, that tells of our kinship with the Creator in light as in darkness, in joy as in sorrow, in life as in death. In the 15th Psalm, we find the following: Adonai mi agur bo halecha mi yishkon bahar kodshecha. God, who may abide in your house, who may dwell in your holy mountain? Those who are upright, who do justly, who speak the truth within their hearts, who do not slander others or wrong them or bring shame upon them, who scorn the lawless, but honor those who revere God, who give their word and come what may do not retract, who do not exploit others, who never take bribes. Those who live in this way shall never be shaken. And perhaps more than any other of the Psalms, the 23rd Psalm has brought so much comfort to so many over the ages. I'm going to ask Cantor Sachs if she will chant it in Hebrew. And then together let us say it in English. Many of you have the text. If not, if you know pieces of it, join with us as well. Cantor.
Adonai roi lo echsor bino deshe yarbitzeni al mei menuchot al mei menuchot Yanani Nafshi Yeshovev Yeshovev Yanchani V'maglei tzedek Yanchani V'maglei tzedek lemon shemo Gam ki eilech begeitz al-mavet lo irora ki ata imadi shivtecha umishantecha heima yenachamuni ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged tzorirai dishanta v'shemen roshi kosi revaya ach tov v'chesed yudefuni kol yemei chayai kol yemei chayai v'shovti bevei Adonai leyorech yamim Adonai roi lo echsor Adonai roi lo echsor
Together. God is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures. leads me beside still waters, and restores my soul. You lead me in right paths for the sake of your name. Even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever. In his sorrow, Job cried out, Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach, Yishem Adonai mevorach. God has given, God has taken away. Blessed be the name of God. An ancient people, we are well acquainted with grief in the valley of shadows. Death and sorrow are not strangers to us. And the centuries have taught us that the Keter Shem Tov, the crown of a good name, endures beyond the grave, and that there is strength in faith. And so with Job, we say, Adonai Natan, God, you gave us Gary Levine, who will not be forgotten. And for all that was good and enduring in his life, we offer the deepest thanks of our hearts. Adonai lakach. And God, you've taken away. We pray for the strength to turn our broken hearts into an altar of trust before which we acknowledge your sovereignty and love, as we now say, Yishem Adonai mevorach, me'ata v'ad olam. Blessed be the name of God now and forever. And finally, in the book of Ecclesiastes, we find for everything there is a season, a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to tear down, a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones, a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time for tearing, a time for sowing, a time for silence, and a time for speaking. And my friends, now is a time for both silence and speaking. Now is a time for holding on to memories, for remembering moments of joy, of partnership, of difficulty, of laughter, and of sadness. And now is also a time of speaking when we share memories and pay tributes to a remarkable individual. But for now, let's take a few moments of silent prayer as we remember Gary.
Ra'tzon imrei fi v'gyon libi lefanecha Adonai. meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, Adonai, my rock and my Redeemer.
The family has asked that three dear friends say some words and pay tribute to Gary. And so in the following order, we will hear from Brent Morse, Jerry Carnell, and Danny Golden. Brent.
You know, this is so shocking, so sad. I'm going to summarize a little bit about what I know about Gary and share those thoughts and feelings with you. I came to know Gary about 35 years ago when he was working for Omnibank. Not sure where or how we first met, but I believe it was a poker game. Back then, I remember that Gary always dressed so dapper with his dark suits, his cufflinks, and his bright ties. Our daughters went to this very temple, and our families grew very close. We went on vacations to the mountains, Mexico, Arizona. Gary and I played a lot of golf together, and the gambling was always on. When you spend as much time playing golf and cards as we did, we came to know what the other was thinking before we even said the words. We didn't always agree on everything, but we developed a mutual respect and a lasting bond. I just loved being with him. Gary was a giver. He cared a lot about people, and he was the best at giving jobs to friends and their loved ones, including our son Brad, who spent a summer working at the bank. He was also the most generous person I've ever known. He gave to so many worthy causes, and he always said yes. In addition to that, he dedicated his time to serve on multiple boards, including the JCC and the Third Way Center, to which he chaired. Gary was a man who changed people's lives for the better. His warm, caring presence was felt by everybody. How many of us here have received his generosity, advice, or kind words? Hang on. Family. Family was number one for Gary. Connie, he would have never made it this long without you. You were his rock, and you took such good care of him, and he loved you so much. Amy and Whitney, we go back a long time, and as you know, he adored both of you. He never missed an opportunity to tell us about the good things happening in your lives, and he also took great pride in the families you two created. Golf. Let's talk about golf. Gary loved the game of golf. It was his passion, and he loved playing and being with his friends. He put so many wonderful trips together, including Purim Invitationals in Scottsdale, Pebble Beach, Whistling Straits, Sea Island, Ireland, and Scotland, just to name a few. He was a connector, and we called him the commish because he was always in charge. In more recent years, he spent his summers in Denver and his winters in Phoenix, where he belonged to Gainey Ranch, and to no surprise, he met and made many good friends that he so enjoyed spending time with. Some of those members took Gary to a club they belonged to outside of Wichita, Kansas, called Flint Hills. Gary loved this place, and after he sold his company a couple of years ago, he treated himself to a membership. The credo of the club is respect the game, and that fit Gary to the T. As you might expect, he wanted his friends to enjoy this beautiful course with him, so he invited many of us on golf trips. In fact, I just went with him last week. We got home on Wednesday and then learned of his passing on Friday morning. It was just so shocking. One thing I want to mention from that trip is that at one of our meals, I asked everyone in our group to go around and tell us the best thing that has happened to them this year. Gary gave the sweetest response by sharing that his wife and girls were in a good place and everything was under control. You know, we can't choose when we leave this world, but what a beautiful time to go when one has the comfort of knowing all is good with their most precious loved ones. My family and I love you, Gary, and you will be missed as long as we live.
My name is Jerry Carnell. First, my sincerest condolences to Connie and Amy and Justin, Whitney and Joe, and the kids. The question is how Gary Levine came into our lives. It was 1962, 61 years ago. We were in 5th grade. Gary went to PS number 5, and Danny and myself went to PS number 3. We were having our first softball competition, and Gary and his team came to the number 3 to play us. When I first noticed Gary, he was bigger than most of us. He was the star of the team. He played shortstop and batted 4th. He was that good at 11 years old. You could see a maturity that most of us did not have. I was playing catcher, and if anybody knows me, I do like to talk. I was giving Gary a bunch of razzing when he turned around and said, "Shut the F up." I looked at him and said, "I think I could learn to like a guy like you." Okay. What I saw that first day was somebody who was determined to be that best, whatever the cost. I did not really know why until 7th grade, when I got to really start hanging out with him much, much more. Gary lived in a 1-bedroom apartment that he and his brother Jeff shared a bedroom, and his mother Darcy slept on the couch. That determination caused Gary to be the head of his family from the start, and he always took great care of his mother and his brother. Gary was determined to be a great father, husband, and grandfather, but most of all, he was going to be the best friend of so many. The life he made in Denver was filled with love for so many. He was one of the most charitable givers of money, but most of all, his time on so many boards. Gary, you will be missed by so many. We will try to keep your legacy of never let a day pass that you didn't share with your loved ones. God, take care of my brother, and Gary, rest in peace.
My name is Danny Golden. I stand before you today in the company of Gary's family and his multitude of friends. I'm heartbroken. I've experienced death before, death of my parents, other family members, other friends, colleagues, but never a friend of more than 60 years. This hurts so much. And the word friend does not begin to capture what Gary meant to me and to literally hundreds of people who've come to love him and to be touched by him. As Jerry related, we first encountered Gary when we were just school children. I thought it was sixth grade. Jerry said it was fifth grade. He knows better. Even then, Gary was a big deal. He was tall and sturdy, a good athlete, and we were shrimps. Unfortunately for Gary, his growth spurt seemed to end at that time. But even then, he had an aura about him, one that continued continuously for the next 60 years until Friday. And I suggest that aura will continue on in heaven forever. In junior high and high school, that presence continued. He excelled at sports. Okay, it's unusual for a 5'6", he said 5'7" high school quarterback. He was extremely popular. All right, he wasn't the greatest student, but he had this intangible quality about him. He drew people to him. They wanted to be in Gary's presence. They felt his aura. I kind of lost touch with Gary during college years as he went on to excel as a quarterback at Eastern Montana State, finishing his schooling at Denver, and his romancing and his marriage to Connie, and the beginning of his banking career. But largely thanks to Jerry, the four of us, and you'll hear from Neil in a moment, we reconnected and our friendships blossomed, and it grew, and it grew, and it never stopped growing. We live in different parts of the country, Gary in Denver, Neil in California, Jerry in Phoenix, and me in New York. But to erase that distance, we went on an endless series of annual and then semi-annual trips. Golf trips, fishing trips, Vegas trips, beach trips, donkey riding trips. Trips all over the country and to Europe. Too many trips, frankly, to remember all of the details, but the memories of those trips will be ingrained in me forever, and if I could write, they would make a very entertaining novel. Two of them come to mind. We're in Durango for a golf trip. The altitude may have been too much for Gary, and as we walked home one night after dinner, we had to walk up the steps. Gary gets to the top of the steps, faints, face first. I scream for Neil, because Neil's our local resident doctor. Neil saunters over, looks down at Gary, says, "He'll come to in a couple of minutes." He did, but he was groggy, so he went to bed. We checked on him a couple hours later, and there's Gary, laying in bed with his clothes on, his dentures on the table, 2 golf books open on his chest. We didn't think he'd make golf the next day, but we checked in the morning, and we got there in the morning, he was snoring away, so we all went out to play golf. We figured he wasn't coming. But incredulously, minutes before our tee time, here comes Gary. He's sauntering up in his Bruno Magli shoes. Couldn't find his golf shoes. Steps up to the first tee and hits the ball right down the middle. That's so Gary. Next memory, Gary, Jerry, and I are in the middle of a raging river in Alaska, fishing for king salmon. After a while, Gary gets tired of fishing, so he sits on a lawn chair on the side, acting like he's the film director of whatever else is going on there. He starts barking out instructions to Jerry and I, saying, "Catch that fish, That fish would be good enough for me to take home. Throw that one back. That's so Gary, always the boss. There were literally dozens of trips that were fun as hell, but it was our talks over cards, over drinks, over other things that cemented our friendship as lifelong companions. We discussed our hopes, our dreams, our fears, our growing families. We discussed it all. We laughed and we fought, especially about politics, but never stopped loving one another. And during those years, Gary never lost that aura, that presence that simply drew people in like a high voltage magnet. For me, one of the best things about Gary was my introduction or his introduction of me to his friends in Denver and the lifelong friendships we started to form with them. Brent, Rick, Scotty, Rocky, Peter, and Wayno, friendships that I hope will continue on forever, despite the fact that we've now lost our center of gravity. Gary was our connector, and he was a connector of all people who had in common, people loved him. People wanted to be with him. So it's extremely painful for me to say goodbye to him. The thought that I'll never see him again, talk to him again, have our telephone calls, our visits, our trips, our disagreements, our laughs, always our laughs. I will miss him terribly. Lest there be any doubt about the magnitude of Gary's aura, just look around at the outpouring of love in this synagogue for him. And to my dear Connie, Amy and Justin, Whitney and Joe, and your kids, I ache for your loss. But I'm confident that in time, as the sadness lessens, your memories will bring you true comfort. For Gary's was a life truly well lived. May his memory be a blessing. Amen.
My condolences.
So my name is Neil Schindel. I'm a friend of Gary's from the early 1960s, and although my name wasn't on the official roster, I think I need to say a few words because our friendship goes way back, and I think is as deep as anybody's. We met in the early 1960s when we were playing softball against each other in grade school. We became good friends in junior high school when we competed together on the football team and on the baseball team as teammates. And we continued to compete together on the football team at Lawrence High School in New York. Gary was the quarterback and the captain of our team, and what he may have lacked in size and in speed, he more than made up for in his grit and determination. Gary distinguished himself as a true leader, and he led our team to multiple winning seasons, including a conference championship. Gary's talent and his work ethic led him to being voted most likely to succeed in our high school senior year in 1970. After college, Gary worked his way up through the banking business to become the president of what I understand to be a very successful and distinguished bank in Denver. He then moved on to his career in real estate and built a very successful enterprise at Merchants Mortgage. Along the way, Gary has developed a huge network of good friends that Joan and I have had the privilege of meeting on various happy occasions with the Levine family. And speaking of family, I know that from our many conversations that we had over the years, that despite his success in business, his success as a community leader, his love for golf, and his many close and meaningful friendships, there was nothing more important to Gary than his family. His love for and his commitment to Connie was evident from when they first started dating and continued to grow over the many years they were together. Together, they built a wonderful family, first with the addition of Amy and Whitney, then with Justin and Joe, and ultimately with the addition of their grandchildren. When we spoke on the phone or we got together, he always gave me updates on what everybody was doing, everyone in the family, what everyone was succeeding at, and it was clearly a source of great pride for him. When I heard the tragic news on Friday morning, I, like everyone here today, was deeply saddened. But as I had time to reflect on his life, I realized that although his time with us came to an abrupt end, unexpectedly and way too soon, he clearly lived a very full and happy life that most men would be envious of. Gary was successful in so many aspects of his life that in my final analysis, I believe that Gary fulfilled the expectations of our senior class when we voted him most likely to succeed. So as the sadness of this hour passes over time, I am sure we will all remember Gary for a life well lived, filled with a loving family, close friends, and fond memories that will live on with all of us. Gary, you will be missed, but never forgotten.
My condolences. Thank you, Brent and Jerry and Danny and Neil, for those beautiful tributes. Dear Connie, dear Amy and Justin, dear Whitney and Joe, dear Carson and Hayden and Skylar and River, dear family and friends all, this is a difficult time globally as we as a Jewish community are facing tragedy unfolding far away that affects us close to home. And then when we experience a tragedy that is right in our hearts, we feel it all the more so. And coming together as community does not change things, but it helps us feel a sense of comfort knowing that we are not alone. You know, there is a phrase in Pirkei Avot, the ethics of our ancestors. Ask the question, Ezehu chacham halomed mikol adam, Ezehu ashir hasamech bechelko, Ezeh mechubar hamechabed et habriot. Who is wise? The one who learns from everyone. Who is rich? The one who's satisfied with what he has. Who is honored? The one who honors everyone. And those words could very well have been written for Gary Levine. He was a man who loved helping and connecting people with one another. He was generous with his time, with his advice, his resources, and his knowledge. He was deeply committed to his community, his colleagues, his clients, his friends, and of course, his family. He loved to laugh, and he did it well. He was both a mentor and a lifelong learner, whether he was studying histories, biographies, or Torah. He never did anything halfway. He was a very successful man, but he was also very sensitive and felt things deeply, which is why so many people resonated to and with him. And of course, he loved his family. And he was never happier than when he could be surrounded by the people who meant the most to him in life, his children, his grandchildren, his sons-in-law, and of course his life partner and best friend, Connie. Gary was born in Cedarhurst, Long Island on August 31st, 1952, and he didn't have an easy childhood. His parents, Howard and Darcy, divorced when he was only 2, and his mother, Darcy, worked so very hard to support him and his brother, Jeff. We heard the story of how she sacrificed so they could succeed. He never had much of a relationship with his father, but he did take care of him throughout his life when he was in need, which was fairly often. We heard about his exploits on the gridiron, and he graduated from Lawrence High School. And as Whitney and Amy told me the other day, the image of a quarterback was a really good way to describe Gary. He was a leader. And everything he did throughout his life was to help ensure that every member of the various teams in which he found himself were successful. He received a football scholarship at Eastern Montana College, where he served as third-string quarterback. And after 2 years, he transferred to DU, and his illustrious career as a quarterback came to an end. And while he never achieved stardom on the football field in Montana, one very positive outcome of those 2 years was meeting a beautiful young woman named Connie Robeson. They started dating. And when he transferred to DU, she came with, and they were married the day after he graduated in the campus chapel on June 2nd, 1974. And after their wedding, Gary and Connie set out west for Seattle, where they spent their honeymoon at the World's Fair. And after their honeymoon, they went on an adventure. They traveled down the West Coast and ended up in Napa, where Gary's father came back in the picture. He had a business selling small coupon books in small towns, first in Northern California, and then throughout the Midwest. And they lived in hotels, and Gary's brother Jeff joined them as well, until his father's company went bankrupt, and the Levines moved back here to Denver. We know his success. He started selling life insurance for Metropolitan Life, and then worked for American National Bank as a loan officer. And then he went to work for you, Larry, at Omnibank. And he rose through the ranks until he became CEO, and then KeyBank, where he became president, and then finally founding Merchants Mortgage and Trust until he retired in 2021. Here in Denver, they raised a family and became a central part of our community. Amy, you came along in 1981, and then Whitney in 1984. Gary and Connie had a wonderful marriage. They had so many friends, and they were so very social. They attended all the charity galas and parties and political events. They had season tickets to every sport team. They traveled a little bit, mostly with the kids, Europe, Hawaii, Mexico, and that one terrible Disney cruise that you will never forget. And they made a few trips together without the kids, to Israel, to Italy, and of course to Arizona. But truth be told, Connie, you weren't that big of a fan of traveling. You'd rather stay at home. And when the kids were younger and he was establishing his career, he worked very, very hard. He had a huge work ethic. Gary and Connie were in sync on most things: relationships, politics. They shared the same passions and interests and opinions. Connie, he loved your cooking, your brisket, your matzo ball soup, your spaghetti and meatballs. But most importantly, he just loved being with you. He was never happier than when you were together. Today you grieve, and we all grieve with you. He was a dedicated and a devoted father. Whitney, you were so very connected to him. You shared the same sensitivity and emotions. You were totally in sync with one another. He was helpful and supportive of you. He wanted both of his daughters to make the right decisions, and he supported them in whatever choices they made. He took the kids on trips to college out east, but eventually they both ended up here in Colorado at CU. And it was very important to him that his daughters were on the right path. He guided them to accomplish what they wanted to accomplish in life, but he never pressured you. He let you be yourself, and he loved your successes. He loved his sons-in-law so much, Justin. You and he got to know each other very well because you worked together so closely. He was your mentor, and in many ways he was a surrogate father to you. And Joe, you and Gary had a wonderful relationship as well. It was so important to you and you to him as well. He supported his children's choices, and when they would call for advice, he was always there, but he never pressed himself upon them. But as a grandpa, that's where he truly, truly found an amazing gift. Carson, he loved playing golf with you. You loved playing with him too, even though you could beat him occasionally, which he didn't like at all. River, you're obsessed with cars, and he loved taking you and your sister on, he's not here, but on car rides, on golf carts. He came to all of his grandchildren's sporting events, whether soccer and dancing, baseball, basketball, golf. He wanted them around him all the time, whether on trips, at home, going out. And of course, we know he had so many amazing friends. Those golf trips were legendary that we've heard about. And their home in Arizona was an oasis. Every year you went there since 2000, it became a place of joy, of love, of refuge, of family and friendship. We all know that Gary was a philanthropist in our community. He was very generous, Connie, sometimes even too generous, perhaps. He was honored twice by the JCC. In 2004, he was the honoree at the JCC annual event, and in 2019, he was given the prestigious Bob Loop Hineni Award. He was honored by the Rocky Mountain Home Association, B'nai B'rith Youth Organization, Jewish Family Service, National Jewish Hospital. There were so many places to which he was generous. He gave to help kidney transplants and Down syndrome. And of course, the Third Way Center that both of his daughters were so involved in. He was the chair of the fundraising event and an honoree. Here at Temple Emmanuel and Aish and Temple Sinai. He was the president of many organizations, the JCC, the Third Way Center. He always attended charity events, almost every weekend it felt like at times. But Gary was also very humble. There were many other organizations that wanted to honor him, but he said no. He felt either he was too young or there were others who were more deserving than he. In Gary's tzedakah, his righteousness, didn't end with his philanthropy. He took care of so many. He took care of his brother Jeff of blessed memory. He took care of his father when he was in need. He helped countless people get their first jobs and was a mentor to so many. And we know that these last few years were hard. He suffered a great deal. He had a lot of heart issues. He had a double bypass in 2014, and that was discovered when he was about to get a kidney transplant. He discovered his heart issues, Connie, the same day as your sister Cindy's funeral. He had diabetes, and there were so many things, but he never complained. He would get up the next day and play golf. He never allowed his physical ailments to get to him. He didn't want sympathy. He wanted to live life to the absolute fullest every day. You know, William James once wrote that the best use of life is to spend it for something that will outlast it. And I like that quote. It teaches us that when we live each day conscious of the beauty, the potential, the special relationships, and the opportunities with which we are provided, then we truly can make the most of the time allotted to us. It also teaches that after we die, something of us can live on in the memories, the relationships, the love that we left behind. Gary Levine died too soon. His legacy of love and friendship and caring and concern will continue to be a blessing to us all. And so as Zichrono Livracha, may his memory be for an eternal blessing. And let us all say amen. And I want to call Rabbi Foster, who knew him so well, to share some words.
think he always enjoyed that part of his life, being sort of in charge. Larry, seeing you here, I'm not sure how you guys got along well, because you think you're in charge too. But Gary was, that's who he was. He loved that. He loved to be a part of that. I know that these moments are difficult, and I hope you'll permit me just a few more moments to share a couple of thoughts with you. You, as friends, came here to talk about his relationships with you, and Rabbi Black so beautifully talked about his life. As the older rabbi, I'm supposed to give some advice. That's my job. I want to do that. First, I want to share with you, yes, this is a difficult time because it's always difficult when we lose those that we love, especially when it's sudden, although it wasn't so sudden, because he did have his issues and his problems. We understand that. But sudden death is difficult because you don't have a chance to say that final goodbye. You don't always have that chance to say, I love you one last time. And so this is a difficult time. I said to Carson yesterday, I want to talk to you today, and your sister and your cousins, okay? I read a book once. It was called The Brief History of the Dead. And the author was talking about the fact that, we don't really know what's going to happen to us when we're gone. There are a couple of hundred of us here today, and we all believe different things, and they're all okay. I don't know what's going to happen when I die. I haven't been there before, and I'm certainly not anxious to find out, that's for sure. But the truth is, this book is about the fact that for many people, there may be a life beyond this world. And he wrote about that, and he asks the question, how long do we live in that other world? And he answers it and says, we live as long in that other world as there are people here who remember us. And so that's my advice to you as a grandson, as the quarterback of the grandchildren, as the potential hole-in-one golfer. Keep his memory alive, whatever he did, and pass it on to the next generation. And encourage your sister and your cousins to do the same, because that is what will happen if we keep his name alive. That's how we give immortality to those that we love, because he will live with you if you remember him and if you teach others to remember him. We want to learn to be better people, not just to be better, but to be better because of him and all of the wonderful things that have been said, all of the ways in which he set examples for this community. He had a legacy that he's left behind. And if you as grandchildren keep that legacy alive, you'll give him that deserved immortality that is what he wanted. Because that's who he was. He lived with integrity. He was good at business. We all know that. He had a great sense of humor and his dry wit. Yes, he had all those medical issues, but he did not let them get in the way of trying to live a fulfilled life. We know how generous he was. We know how involved he was. He was very opinionated. I'm not going to tell the story, but the truth is, we've known each other a long time. I met Gary and Connie before they got married. And his opinions about what I thought at the time have never left him. And he always reminded me, because we didn't always agree about everything. But the truth was, he never let any of that get in the way of trying to establish and continue relationships. Yeah, he was emotional. He cried at movies and even at commercials sometimes, because that's what happens to all of us. He loved those moments in which he shared with his beautiful daughters and grandchildren. Connie, we know that your life together was an example of wonderful years that people can share, wonderful ways in which you can make those almost 50 years come alive. Now, I know you couldn't have always agreed with one another, because that's just not how life is. But you raised a beautiful family. And we hope and we pray that all of you will find strength. I want to end with a poem, and I think it's true. It's called The River. Oh, where is he? Just kidding. The snow melts on the mountain and the water runs down to the spring. And the spring to a turbulent fountain with the song of youth to sing. The water runs down to a riotous river, and the river flows to the sea. The sea forms clouds that turn to rain, that fall on the mountain where the snow used to be. And I wonder if life's mystery isn't much like the rain and the snow, returning through all eternity to places it used to know. For life was born on lofty heights and starts like a laughing stream to the river below, whose onward flow ends in a peaceful dream. So at last, when our life has passed and the river has run its course, the water goes back o'er its natural track to the mountains and the snow of its source. So why prize life and why fear death, or dread what is to be? The river will run its allotted span till it reaches the silent sea. The water returned to the mountaintop to begin its course once more. So we shall run the course begun from now till we reach the shore. Then revisit earth in a pure rebirth from the heart of the virgin snow. So don't ask why we live or die, or whether or when we must go. Don't wonder about life's mysteries, for they are but God's to know. I believe that that is what we celebrate in so many ways, in trying to remember Gary in his moments of strength, in his moments of weakness, in his moments of fulfillment, and his moments of disappointment, because they're all a part of life. And may you, his children, his grandchildren, and especially you, Connie, find strength in all those beautiful memories that you'll pass on. God has given, God has taken away. Praise be the name of God, now and forevermore. Let's all say together.
And so into your care, O God, we entrust the spirit of Gary Levine. For you keep faith with your children in death as in life. Sustain us that we may meet with serenity the mysteries that lie ahead, knowing that when we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you, God, are with us. A loving friend in whom we put our trust. You are the light of our life, our hope in eternity. going to ask us to now rise as we are able for the El Malay Rachamim.
El Malay Rachamim Shochen Bamromim Amsei Menucha Nechona Tachat kanfei Ashchina Im Kedoshim Udeorim Kezoar Harakia Mazirim Et Nishmal Gershon David Ben Aaron Ve'Adasa Shehalach Le'olamo Barachamim Yastireu Beseter Kenafav Le'olamim Veitzror Bitzror HaChaim En Nishmato Adonai Hu Nachalato Ve'anuach Beshalom Al Mishkavo Ve'nomar Amen.
Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Gershon David ben Aharon V'Hadassah, to Gary David Levine, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in the shadow of your wings, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And let us all say amen. My friends, the family has asked that I let you know that they will be receiving visitors for Shiva and condolence calls at the clubhouse of Cherry Creek Country Club, 2405 South Yosemite here in Denver, today from 12 noon to 5 p.m. Jim?
Ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude our service here at Temple Emmanuel. We will have an escorted procession to Emmanuel Cemetery for interment. So if you'd like to join us in that procession, we'll ask you to have your headlights on, but more importantly, your hazards on. We're going to be using the southeast exit of our synagogue parking lot for the procession. So if you're not going to the cemetery, if we can ask you to give way to those who are and ask you to use the northeast exit of our parking lot. We'll also ask you to remain in your places as we escort the casket and the family to their cars. And the last request is please allow the family to do what they need to do if you happen to run into them in the foyer or restroom or whatever. They do need to get to the cemetery. So please watch your timing and expressing your condolences. At this time, if I can invite the pallbearers forward.
Adonai ro'i lo echsar, binot desha yar bitzeni amei menuchot yenahaleni, נפשי שובב. ינחני במעגלי צדק למען שמו. גם כי אלך בגיא צל מוות לא אירא רע, כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צוררי. דשנת ושמן ראשי כוסי רוויה. אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי. ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. God is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside the still waters, and restores my soul. You lead me in right paths for the sake of your name. Even when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever. Ach, tov v'chesed yudafuni kol yimei chayai, v'shavti beveit Adonai la'orech yamim. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever.